Okay.
Sorry.
You're fine. You're right on time. It is 7 p.m. on April 3rd. This is the Riverside School District 96 School Board Meeting Committee of the Whole. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi?
Present.
Mr. Marhol?
Present.
Ms. Kalick?
Here.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Ms. Kraft?
Here.
And Mr. Weirhead?
Here.
12 is present.
Okay. And with that, we are going to move into. Sorry, I forgot to pull up board book. What was our first? I think it's Angela, right?
Public, no, Casmira's gonna say hi.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Get my agenda.
Public comment.
Principal Gorman. Here we go. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Principal Gorman for some welcoming remarks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Park. It's great to see you. I hope you all had great spring breaks and you were able to spend some quality time with your families. It's really nice for most of us as well. As you know, we are in the home stretch of our school year, so there's a lot going on. This week opened up our Illinois Assessment of Readiness testing window, and so I know a lot of our elementary buildings started their first day of testing today. And so for about the next week and a half, our third, fourth, and fifth graders will be just assessing in the areas of mathematics and reading. For Blythe Park, our spring programming has also started. So our garden club met for the first time yesterday, and so you'll soon see students outside prepping our prairie and sensory and butterfly gardens and tidying them up for the spring and summer. Our run club was supposed to start tomorrow, but 34 degrees and snow doesn't scream, you know. I love to run, and running is great to our young students, so we're going to try again on next Tuesday. We have a fifth grade art club that's been very popular, and so that's been extended. And we also have a science fair that's coming up in a couple weeks. In addition to that, district-wide, we have our district choir and band and orchestra concerts and our fifth grade musical and the art show at the Oak Park Art Festival. So it's a whirlwind of everything, but it's a really exciting time, and it's always fun. We're keeping busy. So thanks again for coming here. It's always great to host and see you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will move into committee reports. And first up is Education Committee.
Yes.
Ms. Kalick.
Thank you. So I got to hear a little bit of a preview about the science curriculum from Angela, and then we'll also talk about the social emotional learning goal 2 update from Nora, and then Martha will talk about the family and community partnership goal 4 update.
All right.
A lot going on.
Welcome, Ms. Dolezal.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am here tonight to start with talking about the K-5 science curriculum recommendation. I'm going to start with just thanking the committee, the Curriculum Review Committee, which consisted of Brittany Ayash from first grade, Melissa Dieterman from kindergarten, Carolyn D'Arienzo, another first grade teacher, Tina Duvey for fourth grade, Jennifer Graff, third grade, Chrissy Guastalla, second grade, Jessica Camigo, kindergarten, Rachel King, fourth, Nikki Mazza, fifth grade, Ryan Murray, second grade, Amy Seymour, fifth grade, and Ariel Schillitz, who's a third grade teacher. So you can see here that we had 2 teachers from every grade level represented on our review committee. The timeline for our review work began September 2022, where the committee members were identified, and we began our introductory work. The introductory work started with us familiarizing ourselves with the next generation science standards, which are very similar to the Illinois Common Core standards that we use for English and language arts, or for English language arts and mathematics. For science, we use the next generation science standards. So we made sure everyone on the team was familiar with the NGSS standards. We identified key components for a science resource, which included making sure that they were standards aligned, there was a clear scope and sequence for every grade level, and a few others I'll talk about in a second. We talked about the process for the evaluation, which would be looking at our current science resource, which is the Defined Learning Platform, and then determining if that was what would work for our district and met our needs, or if we needed to look at a potentially new science curricular resource, which we determined would either be Science Studies Weekly or Mystery Science. Then we started our work in October of 22 with receiving professional learning from the Defined Learning Platform company. When Defined Learning was adopted, it was purchased in the 2018-19 school year. And the staff members who were on the science committee that purchased it then, they had professional learning, but it turned out that since that year, there had been a lot of turnover. And so many of our staff members, including our committee members, hadn't had professional learning with Defined Learning Platform. So we brought them in to make sure if we were going to evaluate the resource, they had full knowledge of the resource. So we had professional learning. Each grade level piloted one module. We had a midpoint check-in with the Defined Learning professional learning team. And then we had a final check-in at the end of the pilot to determine if Defined Learning was a good resource. We did, and I'll talk about this in another slide or two, we did determine that it was not the best resource for us. And so we wanted to then pilot those two other resources, Science Studies Weekly and Mystery Science. But because of the way science instruction runs, we knew we needed to start at the beginning of a school year and not try to fit it in at the second half of a school year because we knew we were going to need about 2 trimesters to run the pilot. So we waited until September of 2023. We first piloted Science Studies Weekly, and then we had a final review of the grade level's thoughts on the pilots from Science Studies Weekly. Then from January of 24 to March 24, we piloted Mystery Science. We had professional learning before it. We piloted Mystery Science, and then we reviewed the grade level's thoughts on Mystery Science, and I'll share all that with you. And then we came to our final committee recommendation. So what were our non-negotiables? What were the things that we wanted to make sure that was included in whatever science resource we chose? As I said, we wanted to make sure next generation science standards were aligned. We wanted a clear scope and sequence for every grade level. We wanted real-world connections, or what's called an anchoring phenomenon. And an anchoring phenomenon is a real-world puzzle or event that will serve as a starting point for scientific investigations. So for instance, in 3rd grade, there was a Stormy Skies unit that began with an anchoring phenomenon that had a video about a large hailstorm that happened overnight in Mexico. And it asked the 3rd graders, how can you have a hailstorm of ice in Mexico where it's warm? So that's the anchoring phenomenon for the 3rd graders, who then take the science unit to learn about weather patterns, clouds, how hail's formed, all of that. And throughout the unit then, they go back to that phenomenon to see what questions they can answer that they might have had from the very beginning when the video was presented, and then they come up with a final response at the end. We wanted to make sure there was regular hands-on experiences, there was student and teacher ease of use. We wanted to make sure that we had bilingual resources. There were assessments with rubrics, because that was something that we noticed was missing with Defined Learning. We wanted to make sure STEAM was incorporated, and of course we wanted it to be engaging and fun. So following the Defined Learning pilot, we noticed strengths. It had real-world connections, hands-on experiences, it was engaging, provided collaboration opportunities for our students, and it provided multiple ways for students to demonstrate their learning. But the challenges we noticed is that it didn't have a defined scope and sequence. There are many different types of projects you can do with Defined Learning, but it would be up to us to determine what grades would do what projects and how would that fit in a K-5 scope and sequence. Even with the professional learning, the platform was difficult to navigate, and the projects usually needed to be adapted. So the project, there was a base of a project, but the teachers had to take some time to pre-teach some of the items from the lesson because, as you can see next, it usually was used as a supplemental curriculum. So because it was used as a supplemental curriculum, these projects then needed pre-teaching to happen so that they could completely do the project, and teachers had to find resources for that pre-teaching to support the project. So it wasn't an all-in-one type of resource, where if we were tying the Defined Learning platform to a curricular resource we already had, we would pick the projects that matched the units that we were doing in our resource. And with Defined Learning, there weren't enough supports for students who needed intervention or enrichment or English language learners. So the next pilot we did was with Science Studies. Oh, that was Defined Learning. That's the program we currently have. So we piloted Science Studies Weekly. And the strengths with it were that it had an anchoring phenomenon and performance task, had hands-on exploration, about one for every unit. It's compatible with Schoology. Probably should switch the slides, sorry about that. There are core lessons available in Spanish. The assessments are standards aligned. Students were engaged in the pilot. And it's a living curriculum, which means it's being revised based on feedback and reviews from educators who are using the program. So it's constantly changing as they go. Challenges is that each unit essentially only covered one standard. We would like to see it cover multiple standards because there are a number of standards that we are trying to cover from kindergarten through 5th grade. So by only covering one standard per unit, it made it hard to see how we would be able to ensure our 5th graders were ready for the Illinois Science Assessment, beginning with the kindergarten standards, playing on to the preparing for the 1st grade standards, preparing for 2nd, and so forth. Science Studies Weekly comes in like a magazine format, which we all thought was really great and would be engaging for students, but it actually became very hard for the students at all the grade levels to use. The magazine doesn't really stay together well. 5th graders struggled with it. The kindergarten teachers were just like, it was a hot mess. So it was difficult to use this magazine feature. It was cute, but not really efficient. It's not fully developed because it is a newer program, so the platform's hard to navigate. They're still working on it, which is part of the living curriculum piece. It was repetitive, and it didn't feel meaningful. And the repetitive piece comes because it's only covering one standard. So for a unit that's 6 to 7 weeks long, it's just repeating the information from that one standard. And students weren't really connecting that anchoring phenomenon to like the work of the overall unit. I forget the exact example, but it was something along the lines of the anchoring phenomenon was about hibernating bears. And then they did all the units, and when they were finished, the teacher asked a question about it, and the kids were only focused on one piece of the unit. They couldn't remember what that anchoring phenomenon was. So the connection wasn't there, and it wasn't just that unit, but other teachers were saying, yes, I had that same experience. And then there was more writing and less doing. With that magazine, lots of places for kids to write about science, but there wasn't a lot of hands-on action with the science. So then we piloted Mystery Science from January through March. And the strengths with Mystery Science, and there's some pictures that go along with this. In fact, I'll start with when we met to debrief about Mystery Science, the teachers could only like talk about strengths. And like, okay, so what didn't work? And they couldn't come up with many challenges. And then when I talked about, well, I'm going to be sharing this information with the board as we talk about a recommendation, they're like, do you need pictures? We've got pictures. So I've got pictures on the slides for you. Mystery Science had anchoring phenomenons that engage the students from the start. They didn't just engage the students, they also engaged the teachers. As we were doing our debrief, some of the teachers were like, what happens is with Mystery Science, plays a video for the anchoring phenomenon, and then it stops and says, what do you think? Talk about what you think. Talk with your partner about this. And then you do your unit, your lesson for that day that ties to the phenomenon, and then maybe the next day you do another lesson that ties. And one of the teachers are like, I was learning it, I was watching the videos with the kids. She didn't watch it ahead of time. And she's like, and then it ended, and I'm like, wait, I want to know what happens. So even the teachers were engaged in the phenomenons. They relate to everyday life. You can see here a picture of 1st graders who were learning about sun and sun patterns. And so they were running around chasing their shadows, and then they were chasing their shadows, and then they were tracing their shadows, and they'd gone inside, and then when they came back out for a different recess, the shadows had moved because the sun had moved, and they were so excited. And these are 1st graders who then went to the kindergarten teacher they had, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're studying about shadows, and look at my shadow, and look at this shadow. So it's real life, everyday experiences that they're seeing happening. And we have student and teacher ease of use, lots of hands-on experiences. It is also compatible with Schoology. There were Spanish resources. There's Spanish narrations for each lesson, Spanish versions of everything that's printable in the digital worksheets and assessments, and there are also Spanish transcripts for each lesson. So some of the teachers who have newcomer students were saying that they would give the Spanish video to the student first so that they could watch the video before the lesson was done so that they had a connection to the work that was going to be done with their partners in class. It has vocabulary slides with definition and pictures, which is a great tool for not only our English learners, but also for students who might struggle with some of the concepts, the academic language that happens in science. There are various assessments. There are lesson assessments for quick check-ins. There's paper or Google form assessments. There's unit assessments at the end of every unit. And the videos that are played throughout the units match the assessment. So some of the teachers said they used it as a preview for the assessment or as a study guide for the assessment, and kids could watch the video before they took the assessment just to remember some of the things they'd learned. STEAM is found in some of the lessons we learned. It engages students. All the teachers said their kids were glued to the content. They had great content discourse and discussion about what they were seeing happening, and the kids bought into the lessons, and they felt challenged by them. There were science experiments in almost every lesson. There's what Mystery Science calls weekly curiosity jar or mini mysteries. And those are just quick lessons, like 4 minutes tops, 4 or 5 minutes, that are related to current events. So they had, during Women History Month last month, they had women in science and engineering. And so they had many lessons that taught about different women in science and about engineering topics. February 29th, they had a lesson about why do we have leap year, explaining the concept of leap year and the revolution of the sun, the Earth around the sun. So they have these lessons are related to current events. They have diversity in content and presentation by the scientists who are presenting the lessons are from different nationalities. They're both men and women scientists, so that kids are seeing themselves in the scientists who are presenting the lessons. There are extensions for every lesson, including videos and books that list topics for further exploration. And it is also a living curriculum, but not because it's a newer curriculum, but because as new things are coming up, they're creating units around those new things and replacing some of the older units. I started checking around to see what other districts have been using Mystery Science, and I put just an email out to other West 40 districts, as well as the West Suburban Consortium of Academic Excellence, the WSCI school districts. And at the time that I did the presentation, these were the districts that have adopted Mystery Science for their science programs. Since then, I've heard from a few other districts that also have adopted it. There are a number of districts that are using Mystery Science because it's a light lift for teachers, but strong content for students. And one of the school districts that's listed here is looking at will start implementation of a new language arts resource next year. And it's one of the ones that we're actually piloting. And they deliberately decided to go with Mystery Science because they know a lot of work's going to go into their ELA adoption. But they wanted to make sure science was still a strong curriculum, but they knew their teachers couldn't handle professional learning from 2 large lifts. The financial implications for Mystery Science. For a 3-year district membership, it would be $12,555 or $4,185 per year. Supplies would be about $8,000 each year. Professional learning for the first year would be at most $1,200, but I actually look at that number to be probably cut in half just because of the way that they offer their professional learning, and our committee can help with that professional learning. It's like a train-the-trainer model. So our total cost for the first year of implementation would be $13,385. But then because that professional learning would be cut out, you'd look at a cost for the 26 year and 27 year to be $12,185. So with a 3-year contract, we would save $5,436 instead of paying year by year. I previously came to the board table and talked about the possibility of needing a separate STEAM resource. But as I talked with the teachers about Mystery Science and we debriefed about it, we decided that we should teach Mystery Science for a year because we did see STEAM in some of the topics that were piloted. We want to see if there are STEAM lessons throughout other units, throughout other topics, across all grade levels. So we'll teach Mystery Science for a year, document where STEAM activities occur at each grade level, determine where gaps in STEAM experiences occur, and then we'll plan to address those gaps in the 2025-26 school year. Addressing those gaps could be looking at another program, but I will also tell you that we think we might be able to address those gaps through resources that we currently have. So we're looking at a multiple way of addressing the gaps depending on what those gaps are. And I will keep you updated on that next year. So our recommendation for a new science curricular resource to begin for the 24-25 school year would be that we adopt mystery science. Any questions?
This is a fairly obvious one, but I don't see it listed as strength, so I feel like I have to ask, is this mystery science curriculum next generation standards aligned?
Yes, it is. Yep.
And then another question that I had is, in these districts that we've presented as also having adopted this curriculum, do we know how well they're doing on, or was that, like, were we able
On
to
the
see their data
ISA?
and see how well they were doing on their testing?
The ones that so if you remember when we did our student achievement report, we did have access to other districts' student achievement record or data. And so I did look and see how the whiskey districts that have adopted it, how they did on their ISA assessment. And they have shown growth since their adoption. They've shown growth this is 23. So from the 22 testing to the 23 testing, they did show growth in that area.
Great.
Yes,
Because 21 was the adoption year, so 22 would be
Correct.
the exam year,
Mhm.
and then 23.
3 was last spring.
So we don't have that yet. Are we?
No, so 21 was their adoption year, so then 22 would be the first time they tested after
Yeah.
adopting. So that's their baseline. Then 23, they grew from 22. 24 is the one we don't have yet, because we're
Gotcha,
taking
okay.
it right now.
That's where it is. Yep. All right.
Yep.
What
Thank
ma-
you. I was trying to say that, but I didn't say it.
Yeah. No, I know the dates. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
What makes it compatible with Schoology? And perhaps a slightly broader question, is this common in most of the other curriculums?
So what makes it compatible with Schoology is that it's able to link lessons and activities. The teachers are able to link the lessons and activities they're doing to the Schoology accounts of kids. So they feed it to the Schoology account, it pans out, and the kids can then watch the videos on their own computers, or they can access the assessments online on their own computers. So it pretty much pushes the unit out to the kids so that they can work on it individually on their computers.
Okay.
I think like one of the pictures, or maybe I had a lot of them, so I don't know if it's there. There was a couple of the pictures where kids, you don't see them here, were working like in small groups on the floor in some of the upper grades with their Chromebooks, watching the video, answering questions, and doing the experiments. So it allows for the kids to work individually or in small groups without the teacher having to project it all.
Okay.
And the second broader question then of, is that something that happens with most curricular resources? Is that what you were asking?
It was, but that's, like I said, that's a broad question, so I don't.
It doesn't always. So that is a question that we often ask when we are doing reviews right now, is if they are compatible with Schoology or even Seesaw, because not everybody is. Some are like Google Classroom compatible. And so they'll say, well, with Schoology, you could copy this link into your class page, which isn't the same as being able to push out the whole unit. Where Google Classroom, you can push out the whole unit. So some companies will be Google Classroom compatible, but not Schoology. Some will be Schoology, but not Google Classroom,
Okay.
and some will be both.
No, that's a great explanation. Thank you. I didn't know how
Mm-hmm.
how everything connected.
Absolutely.
Kind of going to that previous conversation, I see it like LaGrange South really stood out to me, having had this for 7 years now.
Yes.
So, did you talk to them at all? I'm kind of curious, how has mystery science evolved over that time period, and like how do they feel about it? They seem to be sticking with it. I assume they've done curriculum reviews and chosen to continue instead of switch. So, any feedback from them that
The
helped?
feedback was just that the teachers love it and that they're continuing to use it with fidelity and consistently, so they continue.
And they're
to
seeing
keep
the
it.
continued growth through the years that they've been doing it and everything? Okay.
I'm wondering, in terms of the financial, you list the financial implications for mystery science. I'm wondering how that compares to the current curriculum and what was the other one?
To Science Studies Weekly.
Yeah, exactly.
To the current curriculum, it's slightly more. It is about double the current curriculum, the defined learning platform. And that's because it is a platform. It's not the full curricular resource piece that has all the lessons, all the units. It's a platform of projects that we would then design into a scope and sequence. And then Science Studies Weekly, because the teachers were so, felt that it really did not meet the needs, I didn't pursue a quote from them because I knew it wasn't going to be something that would come to a recommendation.
Okay. I think you mentioned as well that there was turnover from when the last science curriculum was implemented. So I wonder, was there a similar selection process at the time, or?
I was not here
Yeah,
at
it
the
was
time
later and
that,
probably wouldn't have
right.
been.
I'm trying to remember, I mean, I was here. What was interesting is, and Angela's described, is we've selected this defined learning platform, and I would describe it almost like a portal, or as Angela's described it, as a platform, and it was meant to be teacher-created lessons, and at that time even West 40 was working with teachers to create science curriculum. It was a great concept, very time-consuming, and then the pandemic hit is part of what happened, and so this idea that teachers were taking a long time to create lessons. They were creating probably great lessons, but they weren't getting pushed out to teachers fast enough. So I think teachers didn't feel that they really ultimately had all the tools they needed. So I don't think there was a strong implementation with it, is how I would really describe it. And that's kind of feedback you got from the committee. But there probably was a committee. Like, I'd have to go back a little bit.
I can't imagine there wasn't.
Yeah.
Because when I started, there was a team of teachers who were familiar with defined learning and familiar with the unit writing process that had been started.
Right. I think it was this really kind of this grand design, like teachers were going to work through West 40, and maybe our district would create a lesson on this, and or a whole unit, and another district might create another unit on something else, and we would all share resources, and it was a great idea. I just don't think it really came to fruition.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, let's see. Where are we at? Welcome, Ms. Garrity.
All right, so this will be a little bit shorter. But just wanted to provide a brief update on what SEL, Goal 2, the SEL Action Team Committee has been up to. So I did share a memo, and I'll just kind of review some of the highlights of that. I won't read it to you, but the main points I wanted to point out are just, in terms of professional development, the Goal 2 Action Team prepared and then actually presented to their colleagues in each building a professional learning session in December, one of our 75-minute after-school sessions focused on adult SEL, which when we're continuing to use this CASEL model of systemic implementation of SEL district-wide, adult SEL is one of the main foundational components of that, is making sure that not just, you say adult SEL and people think, yeah, I'm a nice person, I'm got it on lock. But it's really about adults taking the time to recognize what are their own strengths and weaknesses, what are their dynamics across the day, and what does it mean when they think about themselves as a constant model for SEL for their students for 7 hours a day. So it was well received. Teachers really liked hearing from their colleagues as well. So that component of it is something we're going to repeat in our April session, which is going to continue to focus on adult SEL and some of the research behind it, that the impact of adult SEL on classroom performance as well. So those are the kind of the two highlights professional development wise. Also in the SEL world, grades 2 through 8 were administered. I listed here as the past Renaissance screener. Next year I'll cross over into fully calling it Renaissance. It changed names. I think literally in the midst of our first administration. So Nothing like throwing another layer of confusion into a new tool, but it's the same tool, it just is a new name because the company has shifted a little bit. So our students participated in that in mid-October and in early March. I met with the building by building with the social worker, psychologist, and principal of each building to review that October data and to start to look at some of the tools that Renaissance provides in terms of thinking about building level and classroom level interventions, because that's really what the tool is designed for, is looking at that district and building and classroom level work versus, it's not a tool of individual identification of students. So we started that, and then in spring of this year, in our district leadership team meeting, the principals and I will have time to kind of do a deep dive into their data to look at goal setting for next year, how they want to use that as a component of thinking about a practice they are going to implement in their building or a area that they want to kind of unite their staff around. Changing a component of their day or their interactions with students. The great news is district-wide, the results on the screener continue to be really strong. So it's, as a reminder, it looks at 9, it provides 9 different subscales, subscores. So feelings about school, perceived learning capabilities, attitudes to teachers, just as some examples of, confidence in learning. And you can fall, your scores can fall either in the, let me make sure I get this right here. Satisfaction is the word they use. So high level of satisfaction, moderate, low moderate, and low. And it's a nationally normed sample. And the other piece of interesting news from Renaissance is that they did update their norms post-pandemic. So we're using now national norms on a post-pandemic group of students. So across our district and building levels, none of our 9 assessed domains fell in low moderate, or moderate level of satisfaction. So there's no red flags at that level, no red flags at any level. When you look at the grade level at individual buildings, you might have one subset on one subscale that is maybe a yellow instead of a green. But there's no glaring issues suggesting that relative to, like I said, a national sample, our satisfaction, our student satisfaction with their school experience is doing pretty well. That being said, there's always room for growth, and so in addition to just having these categories of where their scores fall, teachers or principals and staff can see what is the actual score. So even if it's not a concern, did our score in attitudes to teachers, is it declining? We can look across our 3 administrations now to see, is there anything that's kind of falling off a little bit that we want to target as a school team? So looking forward to seeing how that affects some building goals next year. And then finally, just wanted to touch on this piece. One of our goal to key performance indicators is student attendance, which I know we've spent some time talking about this year. And, I know we're all aware it's something that has declined across the country, not just in District 96. Pete Gatz and I are currently participating in a 4-session workshop. We've done 3 of the 4 sessions. That's led actually by one of the consultant groups we work with, EAB, that's looking at some research-backed strategies for improving practices and processes at that district level to support improved student attendance. So we're participating in it and then bringing back information to DLT. It's been a really interesting group to be a part of, this this workshop. It's a national group of participants, but it's small enough that we can hear from a lot of different people. There's maybe, I think, 23 of us in the group that we have met 3 times now. We'll meet 1 more. And it's been great to be affirmed in some of our practices, but it's also been really nice to see, there's some relatively easy changes or small changes we can make, even in the tone of our communication or the nature of it, or who's the first person to reach out, that they are showing us, oh yeah, the classroom teacher reaches out, there's a, X% increase in response from the parent versus a principal or, automatic letter from the district, those kind of things. So we're continuing to work on that as well. Any questions?
Any staff feedback on the professional development stuff?
So we, the first one that we did in December, did have good results. I don't have that right in front of me, but I remember, I know that it was well received. I remember, in fact, sending out an email to the SL action team the next day, rather than waiting until our next meeting to say, they put a lot of work into it. We've increased our membership this year. I think we're up to 25 staff members who are on this team, and they really worked hard to make a engaging 75 minutes. And I think there is appreciation from staff that there's been some continuity, that there's been some, that they recognize we had some sessions on this last year. We're coming back to it this year. It's not just a one and done piece, so. Yeah.
Does any of this tie in with like general student behavior issues? I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but just like the whole post-pandemic thing and all
Yeah.
that, like, I heard you talk about like the adult, like I'm modeling and just like understanding, but is this intended to, or does it kind of help when you see a student doing something instead of maybe reacting this way, I now react a different way, or does that make sense? Am I answering
Yeah,
that?
no, it makes
okay.
sense. I would say it's not, like the content that we're talking about with this is not so specific that it's saying, this is the way you want to respond to a student who's in this crisis or having this behavior. That's been some of our professional development. We've had some specific behavior training, like at our Institute Day and things like that. So in terms of specific training and responding to students in crisis or buildings having, a behavior response team of like, there's some shared understanding of here's a behavior that we could handle within the classroom. Here's where you want to call in some extra help. What I will say though is the SEL piece is focused on student behavior in as much as we know that if a student feels safe and part of a community and part of being asked to do things that they feel like they can do, being at the edge of their limits but not in a constant state of frustration, all these things are pieces of helping them maintain their regulation. So I would say if you're looking at it in terms of student behavior, this might be more of the foundational work of creating the environment that's going to support regulation and even if they're having an emotional reaction, an ability to know if I can't fix it right now myself, someone around me is going to be able to help me, versus the specific behavioral training of this is happening right now, the student's at a 7 out of 10. How do we respond to that?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. I mean, that's essentially where I was trying to go, not necessarily like crisis, but just like the acting out piece, and rather than punishing, maybe do something like this, because with anybody, you never really know what's causing that. It could be something that we are completely unaware of, right? So instead of going to punishment, just like a lot of discipline stuff that's
in that
floating
respect,
out
I
there.
will say, I was, we've been going to the after-school professional development, the cabinet team. I was at Ames for this December one, the SEL one, and the staff for part of the presentation, the SEL action team members did some skits around like, how do you manage yourself in this situation? And some of it was, and it wasn't just a skit, then there was deeper work on it with the staff, but this is the behavior you're confronted with. What are your experiences telling you? What's your initial response if, literally nails on a chalkboard, not that we have chalkboards anymore, but like if there's something that like just sets you off immediately, how do you prepare yourself for not overreacting in a moment? Or if every Monday a student has to send their mom goes out of town for work and is out of town for work till Thursday, Mondays are always harder. How are you preparing and thinking about that in your, when you're getting the day started?
Yeah,
what
that's kind of what I was trying to get at. So like there's
those
like
pieces are.
It's not a
are
direct
part
connection, but it is kind of part of that whole
Yeah, it's
process.
definitely part of that, just understanding what your classroom community is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And this idea that teaching is emotional work,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that, you know, adults need to have
It
their
is.
emotions
Yeah.
as stable as possible
Yeah.
to support students.
Parents too.
Parenting is also emotional work.
What are good things we've been doing with regards to the attendance?
So, according, you know, based on the things that we've been learning about in this session, our communication and our, especially this year, you know, our efforts by the principals to really highlight why attendance is important and that it is a goal for all of us and that it's a team, you know, that we want every student at the school. So that's one piece that we really hit on of this is something that is a strong practice for us and should continue. I think we have gotten some additional tools to help some of that communication more. They call them attendance nudges, little nuggets about like if you miss, you know, students who miss 3 days by Halloween are X more likely to be chronically absent by the end of the, you know, those just little pieces of information to share with parents to really bring it home that yes, it seems like one day here or, you know, they got up late, so we'll just take the whole day. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but cumulatively they are. And some of the kind of intermittent rewards that some of our schools have about, oh, some days we're going to have a raffle for everyone who's at school on time. And you don't know what's going to happen, but it could be, you know, you could have a chance to be a part of this or even just be there for the celebration, which is fun, even if you don't win. Some of those like intermittent practices have also been shown to be just help students who are kind of on the fence of, do I want to come to school or not? So off the top of my head, those are two that I remember standing out to us, but I think in general, making our practices more consistent across the buildings and across the district and having more readily accessible information, you know, right on the front page of our website or our home, you know, our school district or our school, individual school homepage. Having clearer parameters of what's illness that I should stay home and what's illness that I should, you know, have an extra drink of water and bring some water, you know, bring a water bottle with me, but you can make it through the day. That specifically, that issue of what's illness is something that all, almost all the participants shared has been tough to come back from the pandemic from because of the messages that changed so dramatically in such a short period of time of like, yeah, you can probably still come versus absolutely don't, you know, come near the school until you've got 2 negative tests, whatever it was, you know.
Sure. Thank you. No, that's helpful. And sure, is it just a minor, do I feel kind of off in the morning, but that's not a permanent condition.
Right.
And Dan, thanks for sending that Times podcast
Yeah.
or
It's a case of good timing on that.
Yeah,
I just happened
I
to listen to
haven't-
it today at lunch.
did you? Yeah, I haven't listened to it yet. I will. I don't know if it's the I saw the printed
A lot
article. I
of
don't know
things
if
were
it's the
similar,
same.
yeah.
But yeah,
I
just-
got one thing that was mentioned that I didn't hear, but I think we were starting to do that, was talking about the effectiveness of going to the families'
Home
houses
visits,
and
yeah.
essentially paying a visit and talking with the parents and, you know, just reemphasizing the importance of getting the kid to school. And as I think I heard you mention when you talk about, well, okay, someone woke up late, and but getting there for the rest of the day is still important as
Yeah.
opposed to just saying, oh, well, we'll do
We'll
it
try
again
again
tomorrow.
tomorrow,
Yeah.
And if not going to their homes, which isn't typical for us, it's a rare practice for us, but certainly we're sitting down individually with the family, you know, with, and I know our principals are doing more of that as well. You know,
Yeah.
just really trying to understand, like, why is this happening?
Right.
What can we do to support you to get here? So, I think that's valuable.
That language right there is actually another one that Pete and I took away of, not just your child's been absent, they need to come to school, but how can we help you? Like, what's hard about getting to school? You know, is it?
I think historically it was a punitive thing. You didn't get your kid to
Right.
school, we're upset with you, as opposed to let's understand what's going on and how can we help.
Yeah.
I think that's been a shift.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I have a brief goal 4 update, so that's our family community partnerships strategic plan goal, and we have a family community partnerships action team. And so I shared with all of you a memo, but I'll just hit on some of the highlights. I know I've already shared with all of you that we had a very successful family learning night this year. This year it was a family STEM, family science night. Last year was family math, and next year we anticipate it being a family literacy night. I really am also looking at how do we really sustain this. It's a lot of effort on behalf of the teachers really that put this together. And I will likely add that to our stipend committee. We have a process where we look at stipends, but having a teacher or 2 or 3 that are responsible for coordinating it and then maybe receiving a stipend as part of that. And I also think that's just one way that we sustain this kind of thing, as opposed to, that was really great, we did a great job this year, but it was a lot of work, so then sometimes those things fall off the list if we don't really find a way to keep it going. We talked about doing our audit of our different family activities along with our PTAs and PTOs. I think that held a little bit of interest for our family community partnerships group. The other sort of piece of work, action item for the group that I think held a lot of interest was this idea of creating a family partnership guidance document. This idea that we would talk about our vision and our values. We talk a lot about wanting to make sure that we really are in partnership with our families in this big thing of educating their children. But also, what do you do when things aren't going well? So how do we scaffold, or how do we create this? Really, you should schedule a time, you should feel comfortable reaching out and talking directly to a teacher. If that's not going well, talking directly to a principal. Just even informal conversation with even our parent leadership team and this family community partnerships. Their parents are like, oh, I would never do that. Like, I would never reach out to the principal. I would never want to bother them. It's like, no, you really should bother them. Like, that is part of what we do, is to problem solve together. But I think being really explicit about that in words, I think, could be really valuable. And then also just this, how do I really connect? You know, we say you're welcome here. We want your partnership, obviously with helping your child in their education, helping them with their homework and all that, but really being more clear about the different ways that families can connect and engage. So I like that idea. There's a lot of interest in the among the action team members to put something like that together, and then it really becomes kind of a document, a vision document for the school district. So I anticipate that that would be something that we will work on yet this spring, and then we would bring it back to the Board of Ed for approval. I'd like to bring it to the parent leadership team. I'd like to bring it to, we have an all-district leadership team, which is made up of all our building leadership teams, and sort of getting just feedback, endorsement, buy-in, and then making it something that's very visible on our website and in other places as well. So that's I would see sort of our next project for this action team. Other things just I think worth touching on. We know we had this really successful night bringing in Richard Wostocki around keeping our children safe online. I think there was clear, I think David, you were at the PLT, it was like, let's just do that every year. You know, we sometimes debate, like, do we do something every other year, every 3 years? And actually, I think Don Tefano and April decided to work on that today, and I think we're already getting him scheduled for next January. So this idea of keeping a parent information night, and there are other topics that become very pertinent, but that is one that we know, I think, is pertinent now and will continue to be pertinent for the foreseeable future. So we'll continue to address that parent information night, keeping the connection with the parent leadership team. I'm finding that there's a lot of similarity between what the Family Community Partnerships Action Team is doing and what the PLT is talking about as well. So I feel like I'm the bridge to those two different groups and keeping that shared work in focus. This is not necessarily the work of the Family Community Partnerships, but as you all know from Don Tefano, we are looking at a new website platform, and really coming from this big idea that we had heard when we did a communications audit, that our website should be more engaging, that it should tell our story better, that it should feature our children in more notable ways. So we think that the new tool that we're looking at has an opportunity to do all that. It's still going to be a website. It's still kind of a static yet somewhat dynamic document or set of documents, but we think that there are improvements that can be made there. And then also we've started working on our community report that'll come out to all of our families this summer. So those are sort of the things that I would highlight as some of our family engagement activities in the work of this committee right now. Any thoughts or feedback?
Definitely, I have a thought, and it disheartens me to hear how much work is put into the family nights. I guess the family science night, and not that I definitely can appreciate that there is a lot of work that goes into it. We did family math night the year before, and that was awesome. That was amazing. It was a great night. And I guess we were really disappointed that we had a conflict and couldn't come to the family science night. I guess when I'm reading this, my first thought is, gee, can't we do more than one?
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe we can't. But
and it's I appreciate it. I thought, like, how about 3? In my own, and then I realized how much work does go into it. But I think I think it's a great comment, and I think it's something we should keep thinking about. Something that our teachers I think a lot of the teachers that join this family community partnerships action team, that was their big idea. That was why they wanted to be on this committee, was how do we bring like very active, hands-on family learning opportunities outside the classroom, which then has to be in the evenings usually, or maybe on a Saturday or something. But I think those can be just as challenging for families to find the time. So yeah, I don't disagree with you, Dan. We need to sort of keep understanding our capacity to do that kind of
random
thing.
evenings are about to get taken up with baseball, but most random evenings are probably better for most parents than Saturdays, would just be a guess.
Yeah, and spring is, like we talked about, spring tends to get filled up. I mean, families are busy, right? So they're busy in the fall, winter, and the spring, but I tend to find spring a lot of outdoor, and certainly baseball, t-ball, all those things we start to find that families are maybe less inclined to come to a school event in the spring.
Can't forget soccer. We'll get bad comments if we don't say
Okay,
soccer.
you're right, say soccer too. All the sports. But it's not even sports, it's just our families.
Lots of activities in
lots of
general, yes.
activities, yeah.
I don't know if this comment is true, but this feels a lot meatier than some of your others. So do you feel like you're gaining more traction, or am I just noticing because you have more content here than typical that, or? Like,
I think we're gaining traction. I think we took a while to figure out, what is this group gonna do? I remember even during strategic planning, it was like, is this group gonna go out and like solicit to business? Like, I think we didn't have this big idea, and I think it's like, no, like, how do we really, refine, enhance, improve on how we're engaging our own District 96 families with our own District 96 staff, and making this an even, richer and more robust community in that way. And and I will say, like, always, our PTAs and PTOs have done so much. And so it's, not replacing what they do, it's really, I think, appreciating what they do, and then how do we continue to partner and then, fill in gaps or areas where there isn't as much going on, so.
I think that was the thing that, just for me personally, reading this, that stood out to me the most is kind of having that, I guess, maybe finding that natural connection there.
Yeah.
Because like the PTAs do kind of do their own things with modest support from the school in some capacity, whereas this is a district initiative, and so trying to bridge those two things seems, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just figuring out where you can overlap there and kind of use the strengths of both sides there. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, this seemed like a lot of progress had been made since the last update that I had recalled. So yeah, it just seemed like a lot of good improvement. I was just curious what you thought about that.
And I think this parent agreements, like, I feel like there was a lot of energy in the room talking about it. It was like, yes, we wanted, like, it feels very actionable. Marla was there.
Yep.
It was, there was a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, from
Oh.
parents and from teachers,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's good.
I think that'll be a good project.
Yeah. I absolutely love the idea of the QR code for the
Oh,
survey
okay,
on the community. Like,
yeah.
as soon as I read that, I was like, oh my God. How
So
did
if
we
you
not
all
think
know
about
what you
that
want to
before?
ask the community,
Yeah, I
and
don't,
in all
but it's a
seriousness,
great
think
idea.
about, brief, right? I mean, people.
Yeah, a couple questions or
um,
something.
But where we'd like, we know we want, one of the things I would curious about is, does the community report, does it have any value? Like,
Yeah.
I don't hear a thing about it, but maybe you all do, and from your neighbors, I don't know. But it's one way we know, and I know the board, as a board, you've talked about this too, like, how do you reach your non-parent community?
Yeah.
And this is, one way.
Something
It is one-way communication though also, it's
Yeah.
not two-way.
If we could keep it to like 5 to 10 super simple questions, like maybe one of them is on a scale to 1 to 5, how meaningful is this, and
Yeah.
what would you do to improve it? Like 2 questions, and then maybe throw in a couple of other. But we keep struggling with the surveys, and people are surveyed to death.
Right.
This is, you kind of put it in a thing that's going out anyway with just a little, you can
Yeah.
choose to engage or not. It would be interesting to see what kind of feedback we get, rather than, in the school or through the parents, like you said, because I believe you send that out to the entire mailing
It's
list,
all
right? Not
the
just
Yeah.
the
postal addresses
Yeah.
of District 96.
So I read that and I was
Yeah.
like, man, that is a fantastic idea. I don't know how we haven't thought about that before.
We'll think on that. If there's questions here, as the board that you might want to know from the
Yeah,
community.
because when does that go out? June?
June.
Yeah. All right.
For a while, it was going out in August, and it was like a comment on the past year coming out at the start of the new year, so we're really trying, last year, I think we were able to get it out earlier. The post
Yeah.
office seems to sit on it for a while. Bulk mailing is more complicated than I
Well,
first thought.
one thing alone, and maybe this is a question to Don, is just even the number of people that open up that QR code.
Yeah.
Like, because that
Oh,
tells
yeah.
us how many
Mhm.
people are actually
Yeah, that's a
reading
good
this
point.
thing,
Yeah.
this document versus
Or at least
setting it
reading to the
aside
point where they
permanently.
scanned it, whether they took the survey or not. At
Yes.
least they are, they're clearly engaging
That's
with
what I'm
the material.
saying,
Yeah,
is it's, part of it isn't even so much the questions, but are you even looking at this?
Yeah, because I know the couple of the clients I work with, they did some survey and they were like, we got a 4% response rate, and we're thrilled. And I was like, what? Like, but it's just because you send out hundreds of thousands of these things, and so getting 4% back is like astonishing. So in a marketing world, like
Direct mail response rate is like 2% is like the
is that okay?
standard, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, 4%, wow. that is
Yeah,
awesome.
they were like, we're thrilled. I was like, that sounds like garbage to me, but it's
Well,
like, yeah.
but I mean, that's a
Yeah,
good.
speaking
that-
of which, I mean, that idea of something you get in the mail, that glossy sheet, if there's something that you don't interact with very
Yeah.
often.
very
generally-
easy to just, yeah.
Yeah, let's
Mhm.
put that in recycling.
Yeah, like I do with most of the content that I get in the mailbox. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Did you have any?
Maybe just a thought, we haven't talked about this, recently, but, the high school district did hire a communications, person, and I wonder if they, like, a conversation with them might be helpful in developing this, sheet, because they probably have a good sense for what the community is
Okay,
interested in
that's
hearing
good, yeah.
about, or,
Didn't we have some conversation with the village having a communications person or something? But
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a good
I would
connection,
say
but-
we've sort of casually, and that person's not there anymore. I think
Oh,
they had like
okay,
a
all right.
part-time
yeah, it was like
contractual
part-time.
person,
Mhm.
and now that person's not there.
So I remember vaguely.
But I'd be happy to reach out to the person at RB. I am kind of curious, like, this is their year one of having that position.
okay.
and
Even
out
to
how
know
that's
what,
going.
yeah, even to know what they've tried,
Yeah,
and if they've got feedback. And
Yeah.
perhaps really, sorry, developing this as I'm saying it, it's not so much what they've tried, but what has they tried that's been successful.
yeah.
That's good.
And yes, it's early in their process, so they might not have a lot of feedback just yet.
Anybody else? Okay, that will wrap up the education committee. We'll move on to personnel committee. So, you coming back up?
it's a
Okay.
busy night for
It
Dr.
is.
Dolezal. The personnel committee met prior to break, and we got a preview of the instructional coaching program and some resource need there. So Angela's going to give us a presentation on that.
So I wanted to take a minute to update you on the instructional coaching program and then talk about the future of the instructional coaching program. So tonight, we'll talk about the history of coaching in District 96, what instructional coaching is and the purpose of it, instructional coaching as it looks in District 96, the impact of instructional coaching, and then increasing instructional coaching going forward. We had one coach in the 21-22 school year. It was a large lift for the one person to co-teach, model, and coach about 140 certified staff members. And while she did not meet and touch all 140 certified staff members, she was the only one that was a resource for anyone that needed coaching or wanted coaching. The following year, because we knew that that first year was a large lift, we added an additional coach. It turned out that the way it worked out with the hiring is we had a coach who had a strong understanding of K-5, but was still able to assist in the middle school, and then the other one had a strong understanding of middle school, but was able to assist with upper elementary. So it was a great balance and a help with the load of meeting the needs of our certified staff members. We did have a personnel issue though, that year that led to one coach needing some time And so we were left with one coach for our entire staff again from March through May of the 22-23 school year, which again proved to be a large lift. At the start of this school year, we started with 2 coaches, but due to a continued personnel issue, we ended up replacing the coach that was not, that was out. We replaced him with another person who was strong in the same area as that coach. And so we had that great overlap still. And both coaches worked with the staff from October through February, but another personnel issue caused our initial coach to take a classroom position, and we were left again with one coach. So I'm going to come back to that in a second on how we can look at addressing that. Instructional coaching is a job-embedded form of professional development. When we think about our strategic plan and talking about personalized professional development under Goal 3, instructional coaching is exactly that. It is incremental, regularly scheduled professional development with a coach and a teacher where they have a partnership between the educators to help with instructional practice to positively impact student achievement. Instructional coaching can be centered around developing instructional practices or meeting a student-centered established goal. The purpose of instructional coaching in education is one, coaching has the potential to change school cultures and improve student achievement. It provides time and support for our teachers to reflect, converse about, explore, and practice new ways of thinking about educating students. Some of the things that one of our coaches has worked on with staff members is looking at new resources, and our coach will say, I want to learn more about this resource. Let's team up together and use it in your classroom and talk about how we can go further with it. So it's a time for both of them as educators to reflect and converse and explore and practice new ways that then the coach pushes out to other staff members. This was a success here. How can I help you implement it in your classroom as well? Coaching improves practice through reflective discussion about one's processes, increases organizational trust, and shared decision-making. And it has large positive effects. Research has shown that it has large positive effects on both instructional practice and student achievement. In District 96, we base coaching on the value that it brings to student learning. We base on there are a few different instructional coaching models that are out there. We base District 96's instructional coaching on Diane Sweeney's student-centered coaching, which means we're using student evidence to propel student and teacher learning forward. The coaching conversations that happen through the Diane Sweeney model focus on student outcomes. It's grounded in content standards, and goals are set to guide students to mastery of standards. The coaches work in cycles with teachers. So coaching isn't completed in a cycle, which is usually 4 to 6 weeks. They set standards-based goals. The coach sits with the teacher and says, okay, what is it you want your students to learn? And they set standards-based goals, and then they unpack the standards-based goals into learning targets for students. So what is it you want your students to learn? Specifically, what is that going to look like? And what are the tools and instructional practices that we can use to get your students there? And the coach might come and say, for instance, this year a lot of it has been small group instruction is an instructional practice that you can use to have your students master this concept. Let's talk about what small group instruction can look like in your classroom. Let's take your data, pull it apart, and look at it and see how do we want to group our students to then work together. And then the coach will help show how can we group students using our data, what tools and resources do we have. From the coach's experiences, they might know of other resources that we have through our curricular resources, and they will provide those and offer them. And then there's a co-planning that happens, co-teaching that happens. The coach might teach, and the teacher is observing, and then they discuss what they saw and what was done. Or they might co-teach and then reflect on how that went and what they noticed and what they would change. Or the teacher might teach, and the coach is observing, and then they have reflective conversations on what was seen. Then they measure the impact on student learning because there was some type of pre-assessment. Then they did the coaching cycle, and then they had some type of post-assessment to measure the impact on student learning. And they determine the next steps. And those next steps might be, let's try this again with another concept. Or now I want to take it further and figure out what can we do to challenge my students who need more challenge, or how can I work to develop small group that's going to impact our students who need more intervention. And our instructional coaches should partner with our school leaders as well so that the work they're doing is grounded in what the school leaders are trying to accomplish too.
When you say school leader, who are you talking?
The building principal,
The
or
principal.
at the middle school, the assistant principal
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
So what's been the impact of instructional coaching in District 96? This is the first year of comparison growth data at every grade level between teachers who collaborate with an instructional coach and those who did not. So this is the first year that we've started looking at, here are the teachers who have collaborated with instructional coaches, and here's their classroom data, and here's the classroom data of the same grade level teachers who didn't collaborate with the coaches, and we've started looking at comparison data. It's the first year we're doing that because it's the first year we've had a larger chunk of time with 2 instructional coaches. We didn't start it when we had the first year. We were still developing the program in 21-22, and 22-23 we ended up with the personnel issue. So we didn't start collecting that data yet. So this is the first year, so we have more of a baseline data than comparison data at this point. So it's hard to draw a direct comparison due to that factor, but also the fact that schools are inherently hard to draw comparison data for. We have classes that have different compositions, different class sizes. If you think about some of our classes at some grade levels range from 12 students in a class to 22 students in a class. So it's hard to compare the impact of instructional coaching when you're also looking at these other pieces. Some classes have some social emotional needs that they might be addressing as well as the curricular areas. Some, there's some teachers have veteran teachers who are strong in mathematics or in language arts, and some have a first-year teacher who's still learning and getting their feet under them. So drawing direct comparison data to how instructional coaching is impacting our classroom teachers is hard, but we can see very encouraging data from our teachers who are working with our coaches. And we have seen that coaching has produced growth in student outcomes based off of the pre and post assessments that are happening during the coaching cycles. So I'm coming to you, the board, to recommend that we look at increasing instructional coaching in District 96. And the first reason for that is stability with our program. With 2 coaches, we've seen over the past 2 years that things just happen. And we've ended up with 1 coach for each of these past 2 years because of things happening. With an additional coach, we would be able to work towards ensuring that coaching will continue with at least 2 coaches should something come up. But also, beyond stability with the program, it provides the opportunity for us to just touch more teachers. If you look now, for this school year, we have a ratio of 1 coach for about every 71 teachers. If we increased it to 3 coaches for next year, we'd have a ratio of 1 coach for every 47 certified teachers. And then if we increased it 1 more for the 25-26 school year, we'd be at a ratio of about 1 coach for every 35 certified staff members. There's an evidence-based funding report from 2016 that we often refer to, that district administrators often refer to, that suggests 8 full-time equivalent coaches, because they suggest 1 coach per 200 students, which for us would be the equivalent of 8. We're not looking to grow our program to 8 coaches. We feel that's an excess for our district, but 4 is the right size for our district. That 4 coaches, growing our program to 4 coaches, would look like 1 additional coach for the upcoming school year, and then an additional coach for the 25-26 school year. And you might ask, if you want 4 coaches, why not just hire 2 now? It's because we want to continue to build the grassroots effort. We want to continue to build the need and desire for coaching before we start with 4 right away. We know that 3 is the right size for next year, and as we continue to build that desire, that want, that need, we know that then we'll utilize the 4th coach appropriately.
So you answered my question. Can I, before you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Can you help me understand why you would do a per student versus a per teacher ratio when it comes to the evidence-based funding? Or is that
Can
just
you
because
help?
everything is based on students?
Because it's easier to look at a school, like, we tend to look at school districts as the number of kids in a school district and then sort of do calculations
Okay.
from there. And you could make it, oh, there's, maybe everybody has a classroom of 20 to 25, but also it's not just classroom teachers, so I think understanding
Okay.
the totality of the school district over enrollment, yes, we talk about a lot of things in education about
Okay.
based on
Okay.
enrollment.
And I had the same
Yeah.
question as Wesley did, because to me, one per every 200 kids means we're talking about one coach per 8 or
Call it
9
10, yeah,
teachers,
roughly.
which seems a little bit much, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like you would base it on teachers rather than kids. Question is, I think you kind of answered it, but in a sense, is this a build it and they will come? Are teachers reaching out to the coaches? Is there an element of advertising to say that
guess,
these resources are available to you? So teachers come to them and say, hey, here's something I want. And I'm going to speak just off the cuff. Is there a advertisement issue? Is there a difference between less experienced teachers and more veteran teachers, where less experienced ones are saying, hey, this is a great idea because in the modern world we reach out to other people more?
Let me ask that in a different way. What do you think our current coach to teacher ratio, those that are actually engaged with the ones that we have are? I think that's kind of what you're getting at. Like, what's the utilization currently, and then how much
A
more
little
utilization
bit, but
will we get?
also what drives utilization?
Yeah.
I guess,
And that's
if I
the-
can maybe build on, because I have a similar question.
You got like
I
10
Like,
questions you got to
I
answer.
need a pencil.
I think it's
I
all
guess-
related.
Right.
Right.
I guess, and tell me if this is, sort of, what's the demand, I guess, for the
Yeah,
coach?
that's essentially what we're getting at.
Yeah.
You're talking about like slowly growing the demand
Right,
because the demand is not there.
what's
is
the
a big
demand? And
word.
I guess then secondly, is the demand higher than what currently, like the coaches we have, so supply? And is that because, and I guess what's the reason for that, if that is the case?
If you could create like an economic chart and
Yeah.
chart that out. for
Right
us,
now?
so- yeah.
10 words or
Please.
less.
10
Supply and
words or
demand,
less.
supply and demand,
Whiteboard
where's the?
behind you.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer everything, and if I miss something, let me know. Since the 21-22 school year, we have grown in the request for working with the coach. And we've seen some teachers who continuously repeat cycles with the coach because it's been so productive and they enjoy learning new things with the coaches. And we've seen some people who pop in, pop out, depending on what their needs are. We've seen a range of veteran and novice teachers who partake in coaching. It's also been a range of teachers who might be struggling with instructional practices and teachers who are great, phenomenal teachers who reach out to the coach and just want to do better. This year, from the time that we had the two coaches, so from October through February, we had 25 4 to 6 week coaching cycles from one coach. And so that was one coach who was doing 4 to 6 week cycles 25 times between October and the beginning of February.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
That 25 is 25 teachers then?
25 teachers, yes.
Okay.
Some might have been repeats,
Okay,
might have been new.
all right.
There were some teachers that worked with this particular coach in the first trimester and the second trimester. Might have worked on math and reading. One coach has also worked with our special area teachers. There was a unit that the coach worked with first grade teachers. First graders, one of the standards they have is being able to understand beginning, middle, and end of a story. So they worked on beginning, middle, end of a story, and then worked in conjunction with the art teacher at the middle school, who then had a stop motion unit, and so they did a stop motion video of the beginning, middle, end stories that the kids created. So the coaches have worked on cross collaboration as well. So there's these different pieces. It's hard to just say like a number of teachers because there's all these intertwinings that are happening as well. Advertising. Coaches do what we call lunch and learns. And so they'll say, one of the things that was done was with map data. Let's utilize our map data to see how we can form small groups to address areas of deficiency in maybe geometry or maybe in numbers and operations. So if you want to come during your lunchtime, because that's teachers' independent time, if you want to come during your lunchtime, I'm going to be in the library and I would love to do a lunch and learn. And then they do the lunch and learn and then they say, if you want to take this further, you can schedule time with me. They do a monthly newsletter that they do jointly together, the two coaches, and it throws out tidbits of information and says, if you want to know more about this, you can set up a time with me. Here's your QR code for you to schedule a time with me. Those monthly newsletters we've done a couple of iterations where some have been emailed, some are posted around the building. Last year it was called Tissue PD, and they posted it in the stalls of the bathrooms, and teachers could read while they were otherwise occupied. So yes, there is advertising that is constantly happening, whether it's in person, here's some resources I have and I'd like to share with you, or it's through a newsletter that's happening. So we've seen the demand grow. You asked about demand. And then, so teachers are reaching out to the coaches and saying, yes, I'd like to work with you on X. Or the coaches are saying, hey, did you know you could do this with Lexia? Or did you know you could do this with Schoology? Or did you know you could do this with iReady? And if you want to know more, reach out to me. Teachers reach out that way. And then there are times that principals have seen staff members who might be struggling with certain instructional practices, and they will say, you should reach out to the coach because I'd like to see you work on X. And so they kind of guide the teacher towards, you want to work on this? Reach out. And then the teachers do reach out and will say, like, can you help me with Daily 5? I want to do better with Daily 5. I want to work on my classroom management. I want to work on my organization during writing. So it's a mix of teachers requesting as well as sometimes teachers being guided towards that support as well. What did I miss?
You did a really good job.
Yeah. That's impressive. So I recall that not being so positive not that long ago. So it has
The voluntold.
I mean, I think that's kind of what it was at one point. That it feels very different now. So are we seeing
does.
a big shift?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're working on it. It's it's a continuing, evolving program, and that's partly because we haven't had the consistency in the people, the staff members in it, right?
Yep.
So once we have the consistency in the coaching, the coaches, we'll be able to better evolve that piece. Leading up to February, the coaches had come to meet with the principals at one of our leadership team meetings, and we were talking about how we continue to work as a partnership and how we can, with the piece of principals helping to guide the teachers towards instructional coaching, how we can make that more defined and more palatable. But then we lost one of our coaches to that personnel issue, and so we weren't able to move forward with that for this year. But that's something that we would start with next year.
I think the other thing is Angela's the point person for the coaches. Part of why she's very articulate about being able to answer all the different things that the coaches are doing. But I also think it helps you and helps all of us as leaders identify district-wide issues. So I think of small group instruction as one of the things that teachers are really starting to say, like, I need to be working with kids more in small group to really get to some of these core learning needs. And I think it's because it sort of emerged from the principals, but also is emerging from the coaching. Like, this is something that's hard. It's kind of new for a lot of teachers, right? And so really identifying broad themes as well as individual needs. I think coaching is unique in that way of being able to do both.
I would agree with that. That was well put.
So just getting way ahead of myself, because this is going to be wildly successful. When we get to that 1 to 35 ratio, do you feel like that's the magic number? Like,
Yes.
if everybody was 100% participating the way that you sort of see the vision, that would be the right ratio?
Yes.
Okay.
As you look for people to be coaches, you're looking for teachers who've got some level of experience. Do you see issues with trying to recruit?
No. So as you know, we have a posting for the position that, that was vacated earlier this year. And so we had to post for that, and we're working on filling that position. And with that posting, we've had 6 to 7 that have already applied, and that was posted as a quote-unquote middle school position because we're looking to fill that middle school knowledgeable piece. But there are some upper elementary teachers, both in the district and outside the district, who also applied for it. So I have a strong feeling that should you approve this request and we post it, we're gonna start with looking towards the elementary base before the middle school base, because it's more elementary teachers right now who are utilizing coaching than middle school. So we'd start with this one being elementary and then the following year, middle school. If when posted as an elementary position, I have a strong feeling that we'll have a few more people who will join the pool of wanting to be a coach.
And essentially, we would approve this, ask you to approve this, consider it tonight. But, you know, I think if there was a sense that like this doesn't seem to fit within sort of our budget or our personnel goals, et cetera, it'd be helpful for us to just have a sense of that, because we do want to hire sooner rather than later. It's likely, not necessarily the case, but likely they'd be internal candidates. There's some, as Angela's pointing out, some strong internal interest. We're then only creating our own vacancies, right, that we want to fill. So, so timing is critical.
No, I'd say Angela, you've done a great job of explaining it and answering the questions. And yes, I always have concern about cost, but this seems to make a lot of sense. As long as we're not, and there's a risk that we will cannibalize our own staff, but we're also.
Nice terminology.
Sorry.
I use that terminology too, so maybe it's not appropriate here.
It works fine.
It's
We know what you mean.
reality. You know, as long as you're seeing the demand and it's a program that's working, so.
At the upcoming board meeting, would you be looking for us to approve the hire for this coming year and the year following, or would we do this in stages?
I think it would make, well, we could probably do it either way. I mean,
I'd rather do it once, like we did with the
just,
EL thing.
yeah, so we're gonna,
We approve this plan,
Yeah.
you post as you need instead of
Yeah,
coming back and.
because then we're not like next year, let's say at this time, or perhaps, you know, sort of coming and asking again, no, we have a plan, you know,
Yeah.
and even maybe teachers who are applying for the role, and maybe if they don't get the 1 or the 2, because I know it's they would know that, well, next year there's gonna be, there's gonna be, we're gonna add another one to the team. So I think that helps, just teachers and our leadership team think about it in that way.
I guess I would just maybe just sort of ask if we approve 2, let's just do a check-in
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah.
just to
That
make
makes
sure
sense.
Yeah, an update.
that we do need that
Yeah.
4th one.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we can always
yeah.
take,
Take it back.
sorry, wrong word, that maybe that's too cannibalistic. But we can revisit it and say that we're good with what we've got. And that gives you a chance to develop people and see how 3 people are working well together. Because it sounds like the coaches need to work well together
Absolutely.
as well. Especially, I'm just hearing that they're putting together a flyer or a newsletter or however they're trying to communicate their services.
We'll let you move to your next slide.
I
now,
mean, there's only one
because-
more, it's okay.
Well, so talking about cost, I wasn't really clear what you meant with
Yeah,
the
I wasn't either.
MCMI.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure how that
So by
connected.
increasing the program, we can partner to assist with the elementary implementation of our new English language arts curriculum. So the coaches would help with that professional learning alongside the curricular resource company that we choose. But then we can also partner to plan mathematics professional learning in place of our Metro Chicago Mathematics Initiative contract. So currently, you might remember each year we contract for a coach to work with our elementary teachers on math instructional practices, on classroom visits, and we're talking about student learning in math.
It's very, what I would call a la carte coaching that we purchase on the outside, and they come, once a
About once a
month?
month, yeah.
So like you're looking, it's not a daily. It's but it's been 28,600 for what's essentially monthly professional development. Different grade level teams come in, talk about math instruction.
So like this year, each grade level's been worked with we've done 2 classroom visits at each grade level. Past years, we've done whole group professional learning as all the second grade teachers in the district at one meeting, and then some classroom observations. By utilizing our instructional coaches, we can do a lot of that professional learning with our instructional coaches who are working with the teachers. We can have those grade level meetings with our instructional coaches and myself planning with iReady mathematics curriculum professional learning staff, rather than having an outside contract for those coaching sessions. So that's where the MCMI savings comes from. We would stop paying for that a la carte coaching. And then just continuing to partner to assist with that goal 3 of personalized professional learning, because as I said in the beginning, that is what coaching is.
In terms of thinking about the cost of adding these positions, what is sort of the job requirement or the years on staff in order to be able to fill one of these positions?
The job posting says you have to have a minimum of 5 years of teaching experience, along with some other things in there, like it's recommended that there's a teacher leader endorsement. Not everybody has it. Our 2 current coaches had it. I say had because one of them is no longer a current coach, but we do have people that have applied that have the teacher leader endorsement as well. That's the one piece I remember off the top of my head with the current posting.
Excuse me.
I'm sure it's probably not in the job description, but I assume we're looking for people that can emulate in their current classroom to then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the questions in the interview are structured to pull that out, as well as asking candidates to analyze data and how would you use this in a coaching cycle. We asked them to do a coaching cycle, I believe, as well. So like there's the performance task piece of the interview process as well. Any other questions?
I was going to say I'm good. As soon as I read that PowerPoint, I'm huge on coaching, and everything you put in there made complete sense to me, the philosophical side of it, so I'm on board.
Well, thank you very much for your support.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to, I think, is it finance, Dave?
They were
No,
on facilities.
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 Mr. Morrow?
We had a facilities committee meeting 2.5 weeks ago. Primary discussion points were central houser. Obviously, we've gone a little, the contractor has had a little delay, and now I believe they're back on track. So we're going to have some disruption in the parking lot eventually. There was some brief discussions on the fact that the playground equipment would be a more muted color to kind of fit with that whole natural theme we're going with in the back. I do not remember what the discussion was on the backstop.
That we're not gonna put it in, that had been an optional,
I missed that
Yeah.
completely, and I was a couple minutes late.
that was
so-
something that the village had wanted us to be clear about. There were some questions from neighbors and decided that it's not needed for how that field is used.
It was an issue with the neighbors, but that issue was mitigated because the new backstop would have been further away from the neighbor
Yeah.
than the existing one. So that's why.
And now we're not putting it in at all?
And I think our PE department, they would rather not have it at all.
We're
Okay.
talking about like a baseball backstop,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Like the big
I guess
Because
there's
cage we have up there now.
I
on the
know, I
right
guess
one.
I'm surprised. I would expect the neighbors would want that, and would want
Yeah.
protection from balls flying up into their windows.
the neighbor issue was specifically related to a complaint that kids in the off hours, note that this is not our creation, were using the backstop and banging things against it, and they found that objectionable. And then there was a long conversation about the fact that this new backstop was actually going to be further away from the residential unit
Yeah.
than the existing one.
That was a big
So
discussion at zoning and planning, I remember that.
We believe this was a non-issue ultimately, but
So it's not going in at all?
whatever,
is the-
you know, if the we don't, our
So for phys-
teachers are not using a backstop to
Yeah.
its fullness, do not need a backstop to its full utility, so we don't need
So
it.
just don't put it in,
Yeah.
okay. And then like I know the Little League uses that field, but I mean, you're talking like kindergartners or whatever, there's probably.
Yeah,
no
that
need
was
for
always
that.
Little League, so
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well, I mean, that it's, yes, it is currently limited to younger kids now, I guess. It would kind of preclude any chance of it being used by older kids in the future, though.
Which would probably make us more popular with the neighbor as well.
But we're not gonna have all the dirt and everything, so I'm not sure if the Little
Yeah, I
League would wanna
remember
use
it
it.
was not exactly a full field.
Yeah,
That's, for some ages, though, that still could be advantageous.
Yeah, well, the fence would kind of stop.
Mhm.
Martha's been in coordination and I'll call it negotiation with the village about some temporary fencing. I
And it's
can't-
up, it's all you've seen it, right? Selena, your kids are there. We are fenced in the front and in the back, so.
And then, Martha, can you add whatever we had on communication?
Yeah, we just,
You've been telling the board, but.
Right, but communication mostly to families and to staff, so new pickup and drop-off procedures have started this week. I know we've had really not great weather at a time when we were really encouraging people to bike and walk more, so. But I was out there on Tuesday morning, both downtown as well as at Central Hauser, and, you know, it seemed to be very organized. A lot of staff out front for us in terms of student supervision. I know the village is kind of monitoring the downtown with us in terms of extra pedestrian traffic, which is one of the questions that came up. The Masonic Temple is willing to rent us some parking spaces. There's a little bit of extra parking over there. So I know Jim has reached out to staff and just said if anybody's interested, that there's some additional parking available there. So it's been really for families, the pickup, drop off, and recess, the impact on recess. And then for our staff, it's really parking. And then obviously the field area being off limits for PE, Hauser PE as well.
As a follow-up, just could you ask Jim to let us know how much are teachers reaching out to use
Yeah.
the potential parking area? Or are they just finding it on their own?
Right, and I don't think they've asked, or he would let me know, but I will double check.
No,
that,
it's a
yeah.
curiosity question, and it's not, I think if we just, at the end of the year, he had an idea of what was
Yeah.
being used.
Just to clarify, though, in terms of the back PE, the back field area not being available, that's, you know, not just for the rest of this school year, but that's basically the entire next year, as well as it any
Yeah.
further than that?
For the grass to grow, but like right
Right.
now, you can't, I mean, there's some parking back there, but you really can't be back there for other, so I think I don't actually know how it'll once the field is all sort of fully planted, if it'll stay, if that same fencing will stay or different fencing. I'll have to ask Ramesh that question.
What's the
You know,
question?
because the field will
Protect
be
the
off
field.
limits so that the grass can grow extensively, thoroughly.
Yes, we will want the
It'll
construction fencing to be up there while the field is growing to indicate that it is off limits to use. Otherwise, people will go on it.
Right.
So it has to look like it's,
unusual. or
it has to
off-limits.
look like it's a privileged location, or it's, you know, it's off limits until it's fully established.
Right, because if it's not, you're right, especially in the summer, it would just be
Yeah, for the
played
summer,
on,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
'Cause we're not
other,
anticipating opening that till school starts the next year. right?
Correct.
The next year,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Is there any opportunity for assessment at some point to see if the grass is fully rooted, like, or
Sure.
it's?
you'd have a landscaper come out and take a plug or basically use a shovel to see how it's doing
Yeah.
and just see how well established it is.
Is there like a certain root depth or something they look
Oh,
at?
I
or
have
how
no,
do-
I have no doubt that there's estimates of how deep roots are supposed to be and what kind of growth rate we're supposed to be achieving. I don't
you're
know the
calling
exact
there's a
numbers. What? Sorry, what's the chance? Sorry.
telling you there's a chance it could maybe, the field could maybe open up prior
Oh.
to the.
You beat me on the
Don't
movie
do it.
quote. I was gonna go with Caddyshack, but you
You
works
asked
better.
Wesley about
One
that
works
patch
better.
of grass we had at Ames, because he would ask me like,
It's-
why are we not playing on that? And I'd be like, why are we not playing on that? And they're like, the grass isn't
Well,
fully.
and then I think there's a patch of grass up here that's not fenced off, and I think that's after the construction project there, and I think there's still netting on the ground, but I'm not sure how
Okay.
much that took root.
Grass is, sorry, this is getting down to basics, but it's so subject to natural events and rain and sun and temperature, and there's gonna be an element of variability till it's fully established.
Yeah, I know some Central and Hauser moms that'll be willing to go out and spray Miracle Grow on it. So they can get their kids out
They
like
would,
good
they would.
PD if we need that.
I could see that.
I guess, like, along similar lines with the facilities, what is the plan for the Central students for recess over the next few weeks here? Are they mostly, I mean, I know it hasn't
Well,
been an issue this week so
Right,
much, but.
right now, so the plan is to play within the fenced, I'll say, front yard. I know Pete was gonna check the courtyard to see if that was at all playable, and right, we've been really hit with this bad weather, so now everything is super muddy. We have a landscaper coming in Friday about mulching the little kid playground area, and then Pete's like, why don't we just mulch, like, even throw more mulch out there where there's a lot of, I'll just say, bare.
Mud.
It's just bare.
Just
and,
mud.
like,
It'll
yeah,
help
so-
absorb.
Yeah, so that's playing in the front yard all the way up to Hauser. But Pete said, and part of it was like the fences need to get up, and, we need to have the fences up to see what the spaces really look like. And he said, I think I'm gonna be doing one group, sort of an early recess, and one group, so we're gonna stagger our lunches a little bit with the play times before and after, so that everybody will have an opportunity to get outside and in smaller groups than I think what he was originally anticipating.
And then I guess we'll wait to hear more in the next year
Yeah.
on what the plans might be.
Yeah, I mean, by then, what we've been told is the playground will be ready.
Okay,
The only thing that'll be off limits is truly the grassy field. So then we go back to kind of having similar space to what we did have, better, I think, because we also have the playground then.
Yeah,
Kids
so there'll be
play it.
more area to spread the
Yeah.
kids out, but
It won't be ideal, I mean, because we'll still be the recreational field, the idea is that would be available to Central kids during their lunch period. So that Miracle Grow would be great. So-
Don actually gave a better summary of the security evaluation than I can do. He did that at the last meeting. Ames Masonry, we're going to be doing the tuck pointing on the rest of the building, i.e. the part that wasn't just added on to. And then in terms of the other items, the village has been thinking about some improvements, so they continue to reach out to see what kind of collaboration we can do. And then the Blythe Park Playground there's the work at the tennis court that's planned, and then, which we discussed before. And then we may be, since all the other playgrounds in the district have been upgraded, we may be in discussions with the rec department about the playground out there and what kind of improvements are needed. And we asked the architect to go out and evaluate the equipment and check for just usability and obsolescence and general quality.
All right.
there was something listed though about the district office considerations?
That was
Considerations
that's the village reaching out to us about their own improvements and seeing if we have needs that can be shared. So nothing definitive. The village is in a long-term plan right now, and they're looking at their own buildings and trying to see is it worth it? Are there spaces that we would be willing to share or need to share? And we're just open to what they have to say. But
But
generally,
we're also
we're
very
pretty
satisfied with our
good.
current district office. But I think it could come
Yes.
up as a village level discussion, and so wanted to make sure that there was an understanding with this board that there's been discussion, there's been a, would we be interested? And this has been sort of a from years back, and then I think their long-range plan is quite long-range, and we really are very satisfied with the space that we're in. I mean, there's ample parking, we're able to do professional development, we're able to have meetings, we're able to, one of our other goals is to have our whole district office staff in the same space, technology and special education, particularly who were not in the space back when we were in the lower level of central. So.
Yeah, the current district headquarters does a lot of the things that we always needed.
Yeah. Unless there's board members that feel differently about that, but.
I'm gonna lean on you on what you
Yeah,
need.
yeah, I think
You
we're-
say
I
you're
think we're
we're
good.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Brattasati, anything for you that you wanted to bring up? Nothing on the board book, but,
Nothing.
nope, okay. And Ms. Gunn's not here, so nothing on policy, but we have press
114 just
114
came
coming
out
Yeah, okay.
today. We got it in our hands, and so we'll Stephanie and I will talk, and then we'll figure out if we wait till May Cow or if we want to bring some of them even to April board. I mean, we can do it whichever way, but we usually have a long enough timeline that we have the time for discussion. And July, okay.
July is when we have to be done. We have to do, okay. All right.
There's not a lot of them. I think Kathy said there's 11 new policies, which is a
New
small number
policies.
for us.
Okay.
That's the shortest one ever.
But they're all new, not revisions?
I haven't looked
It
at
might
them.
take a
Kathy,
long
are they
time.
brand new or they're
New.
just newly? They're not new, like new content of policy.
Oh,
They're
okay.
just- yeah,
Okay.
they're not just part of the 5-year review. They're
Oh.
new because there's new legislation or new information that's contained in them.
But more than
they're
just like footnote updates?
probably. I'll take let me take a closer look. And
If it's 11 footnote updates, it'll be real easy. So, okay. Okay, so nothing on policy. And I'm not seeing any other public comment. Future meeting dates are April 17th, 2024. That'll be a regular business meeting at 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. May 1st, 2024, Committee of the Whole meeting, 7 p.m. at the multipurpose room in Ames School. And May 15th, regular business meeting at 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. And with that, we do not need to go into a closed session or anything, so this meeting is adjourned.